Good evening and welcome to Kitchen Conversations. That was the beautiful Linda Ely playing for us, welcoming us in. My name is Gino. I'm so grateful that you're here. Controlling everything behind there, Darmini and Sarah, your community is in the house. And let us start with opening our hearts. Let's open our hearts, let's open our mind for a new possibility, to receive something new this evening. My mind is opening, opening. My mind is opening, opening. I am opening. My heart, my heart is opening, opening. My heart is opening, opening. I my life, my life is opening, opening. Life, my life is opening, opening. I am opening. So in this space, as we are open, let us turn this divine light to our world. My world is opening, opening. My world is opening, opening. I am opening. So in this divine open space, we send a loving blessing out to the world. Let us lift our arms wide open, keeping our heart open and our mind to know that in this very moment, there's a divine action taking place. That in this very instant, the healing presence of the universe is taking place. That this opportunity to walk in this moment right now is the greatest gift of all, for it is the gift of life that is expressing through each and every one of us. So as we know that this open heart and mind and spirit opens our life to a divine new awareness that all things are possible, that the good of God is happening in this moment right now. So let us rest in this as we reflect the light of love out into the universe to all that are around. And as Brock told us, the light comes in and we breathe love out. So breathing love out into the world, blessing all, those that are awake and those that are not, those that are in pain, those that are loving, those that are in divine peace and those that are in chaos, those that are in fear and those that are in faith. We bless our world. We bless this knowingness that all of us, we are all one and we are all connected. And it is with that knowingness that we take this in. We take this in as we get ready and prepare to feast in the kitchen of divine conversation. To feast in the awareness that none of us, not a one of us, can be free until all of us are free. Well, you better listen, my sister and brother, 'cause if you do, you will hear there's a voice still calling across the years, and they're crying across the ocean, and they're crying across the land. And they will till we all come to understand. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us in chains. None of us are free. Well, there are people there in the darkness, and they just can't see the light. If you don't say it's wrong, that says it right. We got to give to each other. Let our brothers and sisters know that we care. We got to send a message out loud and clear that none of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us in chains. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free if one of us in chains. Don't you know we cannot be free? Linda, Linda, Linda. Love that, Linda. So get ready. We are getting ready to dive in. And we're kicking this evening off. I have an amazing panel for you tonight. But we're kicking the evening off with a video. This video, I'm just going to warn you. It will open your heart. It may bring tears to your eyes. But all of this work is to keep us alive, to keep us understanding that without divine connection and harmony, we will not survive. Here's the video. Mama, did you know?
Mama, Mama, did you know that every night when you whispered "Fado-do, sweetness" and tucked them in, your sons and daughters would always call out your name, knowing that you are their God, the source of all life, all hope, and everything that is right, that is just, and everything that is good. Mama, did you know that the tiny wrinkles around your gentle grins would cast 1,000 suns that could fill places of doubt and fear with oceans of pride, confidence, and power? That you could make crooked places of confusion turn into straight pathways of knowing? And did you know that you could walk across rainbows and make the cloudiest of days turn into brilliant gardens of play because you can see everything and you always got your baby's back? Did you radiate like 10,000 moons when you celebrated the sanctity of bringing a new life into the world? But Mama, did you know that one day the world would wound your children so deeply that they would tuck those hurts so far away, knowing that the pain was too much for you to bear? So they would carry the agony so deep that their children and their children's children would still feel the piercing sting. Mama, did you know that one night a clan of 3 men, entrusted to protect and to serve, would feed their voracious hunger for toxic entitlement by banging into the home of Breonna Taylor, blasting out every ounce of her hopes and her dreams with their extended weapons of false manhood as she slept, filled with visions of trust in the goodness of the world? Mama, did you realize that that same entitled poison ran through the veins of the fake American warriors who shot the life out of Ahmaud Arbery, sending an Arctic chill up your baby's spine when he must have realized the venomous intent of his assassins right before they completed their acts of evil? Mama, did you hear all the children call your name? Mama! Mama! Mama, did you hear the shrieks of anguish of your baby boy George as he called out your name because he knew that you, his God, goddess, still sees everything, and you, his mama, would see from heaven's window panes how the repugnant act of violence that looted his last breath away and brought the world to its knees? Mama, did you know that we will always call your name?
I think I'm there. Wow. Let us welcome Jelani and Aisha to Kitchen Conversations. And Jelani, you created that video. I can't hear
Yes.
you. What inspired you to create the video?
Well, I thought it was really telling the way the whole world stopped, and it seemed to be this thing that sparked everyone into the streets around the world. And I thought it was really telling that when George Floyd was murdered, he called out to his mama. And his mama is someone that we can all relate to everywhere. And so I've been thinking a lot in the last few years about toxic patriarchy. And I think it was a call around the world from mama because these patriarchal systems are no longer working. And I think that when these patriarchal systems started 400 or 500 years ago, it was an attack on matriarchy. And growing up, I grew up in a small town in Georgia, and I grew up in a village of matriarchs. And just seeing the way I was raised as a boy, I think many African American children are raised by matriarch and in matriarchal structures, and that's not viewed positively in the mainstream, but it's a fact. And so I just think it's powerful to be raised by matriarchs and to honor matriarchy. So I think the murder of George Floyd really signaled, yes, enough of this. Let's turn to different structures instead of the hierarchical top-down structures, but let's get together in a circle and solve it like matriarchs.
Beautifully said. I have to just share that living here in San Diego, walking through North Park, and I told this story frequently, and just like your video, it touches my heart in such a way. This woman had in her bay window a huge, it's like a billboard, it was so big, that said, when George Floyd called for his mama, he called for all mamas. And that's the awakening that we have to get to, that there is no separation. And with that being said, my dear friend Aisha shared your video with me, and she prepared me. She said, get ready, it's gonna bring some tears. The gunshot gets me every time. Aisha, you have been on the front line of an activist for people as a practitioner. What is this time calling forth from you?
This time I'm still reacting to Jelana's video.
I know.
This time has called forth everything that I've studied, every practice, everything that I thought I knew. It's challenged me to dig deep and live it in a way as never before. My practice has to be so rigorous, and my faith has to be so strong. And there are times that I falter and it humbles me. But I think everything in life has prepared me as best it can for this time, because it's critical that we keep the vision, that I keep the vision before me, that I see the possibility relentlessly, and that I keep love and joy in my heart. And that's work.
It is work. A lot of things have come up for me. So, Jelani, I'll ask you this question. What is it like for you as a black man in America?
For me, as a black man in America, I think that's kind of a long question because I think, growing up in a small town in Georgia, I think for me, I have to situate that in a time and a place. It was a small town in Georgia, but it was also the 60s. And things were changing. Things were changing rapidly. Lots of things were changing positively. I left Georgia when I was 18. When I left, it was the beginning of the Reagan era. And I think the last 40 years, things just started shifting. Things started shifting in a way that I couldn't quite understand. I went to a small, private, high-quality undergraduate education, and it was rich. I mean, I was I had wonderful experiences of being very popular, asked to do this. I'm a country boy from Georgia thinking, okay, I can go here and I can hide in the corner somewhere. But I just kept being pulled out and people pulling me into their circles. And it was, a great experience. I did theater, I did music, I was a president of the School of Music, I gave the commencement speech, and then I moved to Los Angeles in
Uh-oh.
1983. And I was like, okay, I'm a big fish, and then a tiny, tiny little fish in a little pond. But I think it was much more than that. I think the mood of the country was changing so much. Constant microaggressions, like those small slights and cuts. Someone described microaggressions as death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's like all of those slights that I had not experienced that in Georgia. I mean, I grew up on the black side of town, on the other side of the railroad tracks, but I grew up in a white, small Catholic church. When I left school, I had the keys to that Catholic church in a white neighborhood. I can't imagine that experience today. We've disintegrated so much. So all of those things, after moving to LA, I just felt my life falling completely apart. I felt myself falling completely apart. I felt more and more alienated through the 80s, through all the big stories, the Rodney Kings, the O.J. Simpson, all of
Right.
those big stories that played into a national narrative about who black men were. And so things were falling apart. So I'm not scared of things falling apart because I know they can get better. And for me, they got better because I started traveling. The first time I felt like an American again was my first trip to Paris. And I felt like people were looking at me like, oh, here comes an American walking down the street rather than, oh, here comes a black man. And so I was really curious about how I could heal my life. And I went to Dachau concentration camp. And I thought, wow, I wish there was a place where African Americans could go to heal all the pain and trauma, the intergenerational trauma of the slave history. So someone said, oh, there's a place in Senegal with the International Museum on Slavery. So I started traveling to Senegal to the little slave house, and it was, I wanted to have one of those experiences where people walk into the slave castle or slave house and fall down and cry, and it's like, oh God, I need that kind of cleansing. I want to have that catharsis. And it didn't happen for me like that. But what happened was I met an artist on the island, and he makes art out of scraps from the island. And it was like something went off in my head and it said, you think your life is broken. All of those broken pieces are scraps of your life that you're supposed to put together and make them into a piece of art. And so that's when my healing process started. But I can say that it's more than a notion to be a black man. The alienation, constant narratives and push that you don't belong here. So I ended up doing a PhD in studying belonging and unbelonging, and so really understanding the structure and the systems that are in place to make sure you don't belong. And so understanding those systems and then to give myself permission. Yes, you belong. You're a child of God. You have a different story, and you belong.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that you brought in a child of God. Aisha, in the spiritual community, this has been an avenue that we've kind of danced around. I believe that's my opinion that we've kind of, skirted that opportunity to confront the differences that we deal with every day. So you really being a practitioner, a very inspirational and spiritual person of your practice and your living, how do you bridge this gap?
For me, there's never been a dichotomy.
Okay.
There's never been a tension between one and the other, but it's been my experience in life that if I'm in an activist community, sometimes people are used to what's all that spiritual conversation, and in a spiritual community, they would say, why are you bringing politics into the spiritual community. But for me, and my understanding of what love is and what spiritual principle is in terms of oneness, how could I not respond to what I see around me that is happening to a part of myself? Like that is happening to a part of myself. If that's children in cages, if that is Black men and women unarmed people being shot down, that's a part of me. If I really know what love is, how could I not respond to that? And yes, there is that within all of us that is whole, perfect, and complete, and untouched, and unharmed, undiminished. That's true. In spirit, and we're supposed to help reveal that on earth. It happens through us to reveal the kingdom, the perfection on earth. So there's a responsibility there from my point of view, for people who call themselves spiritual or being on a spiritual path. And this is where we are called to another level of spiritual maturity, because this work requires a lot of maturity. To look at the shadow side of ourselves and our communities, that takes courage, the ability to do self-reflection, to own our emotions, to take responsibility for our fear. And now we're finding out if we're up to it. Now is the time.
Big time. A few years ago, I was in Australia, and it was the first place, as you said you felt in Paris, Jelani, that I did not feel like a Black woman. I was viewed as an American, but an American woman. And it was so different at first. I didn't really know how to adjust because I didn't feel that. Now, there were many people of color, but very few Black Americans that I came across at that time when I was on tour. And so when you come back to the United States, when you're here, and Aisha, I know you've traveled a lot into Africa. I remember when you went to Egypt. What was the difference that you felt out of the country that was missing in the country, that is missing in the country?
I think that travel is one of the best educations you can possibly have, because you really meet yourself. You're out of your normal routine, your normal mindset. So as you encounter people, as I encounter people, I meet myself every time in how I react and how I respond. When I travel, I feel so expanded. I feel so free. People are curious about me as an American, and sometimes as a Black American, and I'm fascinated about them. But I think I remember in particular when I went to South Africa, and this was before the first election in which Black South Africans could vote.
Wow.
And that had a profound effect on me. Because both of us had suffered under racism and segregation and oppression, but they have retained much of their culture. The earth beneath them was their earth. And when I hear the music and the dance that is an inherent part of this culture, I feel that closeness to the earth. It's hard to put language on it. But that trip in particular, I I had a sense of something, that connection to earth being something to be really treasured. And and the importance of our culture and tradition.
I love it. I love it. Jelani, working in the, I think you work in the school arena, how do you see, or what are your thoughts about how we can help our children understand their greatness, their history, and not so much just the slavery, but understanding that we did come from kings and queens, and we have a very rich history that a lot of the school books don't like to talk about. How do you feel that you can help our kids understand that?
I think part of it is studying and understanding the structures of how people have been oppressed. Knowing, first off, that all the textbooks are published by corporations that match, American capitalism. And just, thinking about Aisha, and travel is like amazing. And like her, when I'm traveling, I feel like I meet myself. I usually travel by myself, and I carry a journal. And it's like I can't speak the languages sometimes, and so it's like I can't wait to get back to the hotel or wherever I'm staying, so I can like talk to somebody. And I write it in my journal. And it's like, wow, the realization. So I love that. And so I want to be clear about going to Paris. It's not to say that there's not racism,
Oh,
but that racism is not turned towards me as an American. And so going to Africa a lot, seeing like the structures of how patriarchy and a different kind of racism, but they're twins. American, the enslavement of people in the Americas, and colonization, they're just twins that operate in the same way. And so to be immersed, so I think travel is a way for educators to go and to see things differently, to learn the structures. I've been really blessed in the last few years of working in education. I worked for the last 3 years in restorative justice. And so I really didn't, I don't, I see the problem of being punitive with kids and punishing kids and the school to prison pipeline, as they call it. So my job for the last few years was the complete opposite, and to work with schools away from suspensions. Um, One requirement of my job is I had to stand on the street corner every day and tell kids, "Good morning, how are you doing today? Good to see you." And so to working on that, changing the culture about how we see kids, and to make sure one of the rules was you can't wear a hoodie.
you
And
can't say
so
that
there are
again?
people who, yep, you can't wear a hoodie. And so there were people, adults, who would yell at the kids, "Take the hoodie off." And so to change how we do that, for an African American girl to take off her hoodie, it's an assault. If she's having a bad hair day, don't ask her to take her hoodie off. Or a child who's on the spectrum, that's their one safety. And I worked in an area that was highly traumatized with people, unhoused people, people experiencing mental illness episodes, hunger, sex trafficking. So a hoodie is the one thing. Oh my God, let me leave home and let me get to school and be in my space. And so to say good morning to a child, first of all, and to have a conversation, to get to know them first. And so like my whole day was a lot of that, sitting in circles. So schools have taken up restorative practices. So that's one way. I can say that I went through 2 master's degrees, and I never had books or learning that was from my culture. So to do critically and culturally relevant teaching is really, really important. To have books with people that look like the kids we're teaching, so that kids can learn that, yes, your story matters. So, yeah, basically, not the top down stuff. No yelling at kids, no barking at them, but embracing them. And it's like, we have a problem. Okay, how do we find a solution together?
That's, it's a beautiful thing that there are people awake recognizing that the way we used to do things doesn't mean that that's the way it should be done or continued to be done. Because consciousness, I feel, is speeding up to catch with this new realization. So with that, Aisha, I see you shaking your head that you're like, yeah. How do you feel consciousness is catching up?
I feel like this bullet train is coming right now, and people are hanging on for dear life. Like, I want to make the leap, and it's such a huge wave.
Yeah.
That it's hard to integrate fast enough.
Yeah.
So ask me that question again, because the bullet train caught me.
I love that. That's so visual. So how do you feel consciousness is catching up? Or do you think it's catching up?
I think we're in a quantum leap of consciousness. Nobody could have anticipated the amount of change, not just around us, but our response to that change. No one, least of all people who have been in the trenches for social justice for years, anticipated the global response to George Floyd's death.
Yes.
Global, international, a gazillion countries and cities in America. The very first protest I went to in LA, and there was COVID, so I'm mindful about 6 feet. And I'm thinking, a few of us are going to show up at this demonstration.
Right.
And I'm calling my friend who's already at the park, and I'm saying, there are people everywhere. There are people coming from everywhere. There are lines of people coming, and they're not Black. I mean, and it was such an overwhelming number of people. I had to leave because there was no social distancing at all. And that response across race, and in many cases across age, has not abated. It hasn't stopped. And so to me, that's evidence of something that's been bubbling, perking under the surface for a long time. And then suddenly that magic tipping point happened. And this huge wave of expansion has manifested. I look at the Black Lives Matter activists who have been visioning for a long time about what is the community look like that we want to create. They are out in the street protesting, but they are simultaneously envisioning the communities they want to live in. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's this opportunity to present to the country what could safety in our communities look like. And quantum leap, there's space for that conversation to be happening on a national scale. And there are people ready to have that conversation. I was in one meeting, and someone is not only rolling out point by point what that actually looks like,
Wow.
but they're rolling it out in terms of the city's budget. People have been preparing and doing their homework so that when that moment came, they could meet it. So I know there is chaos around us in many ways, and I am not minimizing the loss that many of us are experiencing and the incredibly challenging times emotionally and economically. And simultaneously, something extraordinary is happening. So when I have those moments like it's too much, it's too much. I have to discipline myself to remember it, and all of this is happening too. And I want to help push that way. It couldn't happen if it wasn't a collective consciousness response.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I feel that in my lifetime that I will see this major shift in consciousness of accepting life differently. I even feel that we don't quite have the language for it yet. You know, we're creating this language that will express who we are as beings. So, Jelani, in that, what do you feel you can do to, as Aisha said, keep pushing the bubble, keep spreading the word? We all have friends that are all different cultures. Do you share with them? Do you have conversation, the uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah, reflecting on my past 3 years in education and just thinking about when I first went to that school and people looked at me cross-eyed, like, who is this crazy guy? What is he talking about? And I think of a staff of probably 100 adults. They all thought I was crazy. The principal even looked at me as if I was a little bit crazy, and I was placed there because the school had so many suspensions. We had about 100, that first year. The second year, we had one suspension, and people started understanding this new language, these new approaches and new practices. So it ended up being a really powerful witnessing of how we can do things differently and have positive results. And it wasn't that we just stopped suspending kids, but also the culture changed. So I know that cultures can change. So part of it is continuing, in those realms of really changing, pushing paradigm shifts, and not in some sort of aggressive way, but just being. And so my new job, I'm getting to bring social justice. I'm getting to bring culturally relevant practices. I'm getting to work with young college graduates who work in the district. I'm getting to coach them. So I feel that that's part of it. And I think also I miss all of my creative endeavors, studying music, theater, film producing, studying culture. So I'm really looking for ways to work with other artists to see paradigm shifts, because I think there is a deep, deep, deep contagion of complacency and, for lack of a better word, laziness. I lost a friend yesterday of about 40 years. We were great friends, and he ended up screaming at me that, "You've become a radical. I don't know who." And I'm the same person. And I asked him, I said, "Could you kindly just see me? You know what my values are. You know that I believe that everyone should be housed. This is something that hasn't changed. I'm someone who believes in peace." And so he was trying to get me to join the contagion of our political realm. And I'm saying, I just think we have to push a little bit further. Growing up in West Hollywood in the 80s and seeing so many people who died, it was
Yeah.
people who pushed, the Reagan and the Bush administration and some in the Clinton administration. They pushed them to think differently for different paradigms. And now, all of the tremendous transformations that happened in the medical realm, it was because those people pushed, and that affected everyone around the world. It helped. It helped. All across Africa, where so many people were affected by the AIDS crisis, the pandemic. So thank goodness for that small band of people who pushed. And I think we have to push. And if it appears to other people to be radical, then I think we just have to let that be. And I think we might lose some people along the way, until they realize, I see what you were saying.
Well, there are all different levels. I think we have people at all different levels of consciousness. I'm going to share this story with both of you and I'll ask Aisha first to comment on it. I had a dear friend of mine ask the question, She and her husband had been going back and forth, and they saw a policeman arrest and attack this black woman, and 2 days later, she ended up dead in the jail. So their question to me was, Gino, why wouldn't she just do what the officer said? Why? And with that, let me put the side note that there were people that they had presented this to before that said that question is racist. So she's presenting it to me. I mean, I'm not saying the cop was right, but why wouldn't she just do whatever the cop said? Because, some of them are nasty and I said, well, she was pulled over because of a tail light. But it turned out that the cop, even in their conversation, he was a nasty police officer. And so she was not like, yes, sir, no, sir. She threw her license at him, I think it was. But he pulled her out of the car, knocked her around, arrested her. Somewhere between the arrest and a couple of days later, she died in jail. So the question being, this was their main question, why didn't she just do what the police officer said? I will share what I said with her afterwards, but I'll turn it over to you.
I'm quiet because I think in that moment I would be really needing to center myself. If we're thinking of the same story, it is one that continues to haunt me. Whenever I see a picture of that particular woman, I cry.
Yeah.
I think the question comes back, do you think that behavior means she should die in police custody? That for a taillight or for being what you consider disrespectful, she should be dead? How many people in your family or your community or your workplace who have been more than that, maybe a drug driver, maybe in a brawl, whatever, end up dead, end up arrested and dead? What? I want to hear what you said, because I really struggle with that when I hear that lack of understanding and empathy.
I will. Jelani, do you want to speak to that?
I've had conversations like that, and it's for me. I think those conversations, those statements, are very hurtful. And at the same time, I think it has to go back to the original American myth, where people have been trained to not be empathetic, to believe in hierarchies of people and worthiness of people. And you mentioned textbooks. I think we have to start really telling the truth about, the founding fathers. They were vicious capitalists who harmed a lot of people. First of all, the sin of murdering millions of native people who already lived here. I mean, that level of entitlement. And then in the enslavement of Africans that they brought here. And then also all of the poor whites who were not a part of the enfranchisement either, but they were trained to know, well, you've got a little bit more than those other savages. And so I think we've had 400 years of training people not to be empathetic. And we have to, perhaps from a spiritual context, really training people to, we have to be empathetic. You saying about None of us, if all of us are not free, none of us are free.
Yes.
And so I think people, they believe in that hierarchical myth and they end up harming themselves and they don't even know it. So how do we flatten that and how do we stand in circles? I just really believe the power of circles. So when I've heard comments like that, it's just one of my, probably not the strongest thing to do is to just say, ah, I see where you're coming from. You're not very intelligent. And I step back from those people. And so I would like to be better myself about facing those hurtful moments and really talking through them.
Can I jump in here?
Yes.
The driver of the car, she had a right to ask, why are you stopping me?
Yes.
She had a right to ask the questions she asked. And so when your friend says, why didn't she just obey? Because she has rights. And she was exercising. And maybe her tone was not the tone that the police officer liked, but she had a right to ask those things. And so then I would begin to reflect the questions back to the person that asked them. So what's not okay with exercising your rights? Is it okay for her to exercise her rights with the police officer? Do you think she should have been arrested over a taillight? Now, Gino, what'd you say?
First off, I definitely want to say that these are the type of uncomfortable conversations that I want us to be open to. And I say us being myself. I want to encourage my white brothers and sisters to have these conversations. And every black person answer is going to be different. So know that as well. But in essence, what I said, I agree that the respect that they were talking about, because they kept saying, why wouldn't she just comply? Why wouldn't she just do? And I took it further saying that, every day as a black person, you are disrespected. There are those little daggers that are thrown throughout your entire day, which becomes your life. And so when this woman was pulled over, she had the right to ask. And because her voice and her tone, you're the professional. You're supposed to be able to handle that situation. And she said, but how could we be looked upon as racist? I said, because if this were a white woman, you would be outraged. The difference is that we see separation. You see a loud black woman that she was rude. So what? That gives no one the right to take someone's life. And I think that's the awareness. We all have bad days. And I was like, maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe on another day, she might have been like, all right, officer, here you go, bam. But regardless, every day we deal with racism in our workplace. A lot of us deal with it even in our own homes with our loved ones. We see separation within us. We deal with it in traffic. I've been called some nasty names driving. It's a constant. You go to the store, and this is not every time, but sometimes people are following you around the store. You're walking down the street, you see somebody cross over because they're looking at you in a certain way. You have no idea what that's like to deal with constantly. And some days you've had enough. And so she had the right to ask this cop in any manner. She didn't touch him. She didn't touch him. Her mouth spoke. That's his job. But we have given our police the right to be judge, jury, and take a life and say, oh, I was fearful for my life because a voice was raised. So I said to her, being mindful of this, and she started to understanding that I'm not black one day. Every day I'm black. And every day, a lot of people see me as that. They see a separation. And I believe part of the consciousness that we're moving through is not to see the separation, but to see divine beings. Some beings are great and some are not. Color should not factor in. And our police department we've allowed them to take over in a sense that there hasn't been any justification. I remember when Rodney King in LA, and everybody was so sure that the police officers were going to be punished because everyone kept saying, they've got video. They have video. They've got a video. It's impossible. And the impossible happened. And so, that being said, Aisha, you've written a beautiful poem that I would love for you to read, because in all of this, I believe that conversation, understanding, there's no way that my white brother and sister can understand my living space of what I go through without conversation. So we can't be politically correct. It has to be open, and sometimes it's painful. I remember after our conversation, my energy just went, but I don't want to shut that off, because without that, we don't recognize the pain. And she said, I'm sorry that I brought up so much pain for you to feel. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I said, that until you see me as you, until you understand that there is no difference, and that a police officer has a responsibility to be a professional and not pull your gun, not beat a woman, and not hide behind a badge. So I'd love for you to read your poem now.
Oof. Hey. This poem is called Never Too Much. It's too much. Too many deaths, too much grief, too many excuses, not enough answers. Why black folks don't survive police? Why Dylan Roof gets a hamburger? Why vigilantes get a pass? Why black folks get dead? Too many lynchings caught on video, too many police and DA cover-ups. Too seldom does justice prevail, too often killers walk free. Too young do our children die, too many believing they'll never grow old. Too many empty seats at family tables, each birthday a time for mourning. Too many empty promises, too quick to say, let's move on. Too often, now's not the right time. Still hearing, we need more time. Damn, it's been 400 years. Too slow does justice come. Freedom can't come too soon. Too late to turn back the clock. We've come too far to turn back now. Still too easy to whitewash murder. Oh, so hard to forgive. Grief, rage boil inside. so exhausting to keep it in check. How much longer must we protest? How many more kings must fall before those who sleep awaken, before the righteous rise again? Always violence hangs in the shadows. Never can we totally forget. Sometimes the wailing's just too much. Too many times the pain, just too much. But never, 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 never can there be too much love. The circle too small, let's widen it. The burden too heavy, let's share it. The way through lost, together we'll find it. Walls too high between us, stone by stone we dismantle it. Too much to overcome, we start where we are. When to begin, here and now. Sometimes it feels like just too much. Sometimes it is too much. But there is never, 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 never too much love. Love, love.
That is awesome. I love it. Everybody is shaking their hands. That's beautiful. Wow. So I'm going to open this up, and I want you to share something that you want to release from your spirit that doesn't have to be super personal, but maybe just something that you want to let go of right now. Like, I'd like to let go of all this shine. I'm sweating, so. So when you look back, people, it's hot in the studio. But if there's an experience or a story that you want to share that will bring insight, that will release, that will heal, I'm opening it up really broad. So, Jelani, I'm going to go to you.
I think as we were talking about police and that question that someone asked, I would like to let go of my story, but I think it is an American story. I would like for people to understand that the police department is a direct link to slave patrols. Slave patrols were commissioned to go out and bring back property, not to care for human beings. And so that morphed over the 400 years into police departments. They're basically protecting property. It is a lie that they are to protect and to serve. And so for African Americans, Black people, they have a deep, deep, deep connection to police, and a very deep, visceral feeling. So a story that I'd love to let go is, in my late 20s, I'm like pursuing acting. I'm a substitute teacher, a regular teacher. I thought, nah, let me get out of this. I'll be a substitute, a nice person, going to church, a few times a week, being a good Catholic. And so I got a ticket. And so since I'm a poor, starving, struggling actor, I didn't pay it. And I thought, well, there's drug dealers in LA and they're murderers. They're not going to be looking for me. And I'll pay it when I can scrape up, probably $85 or however much it was. So I'm going home one night and they stop me. And so I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And it was more of the subtle loathing and hatred that I felt directed towards me. The older officer who was driving, he looked back into the rearview mirror and he said, "We've been looking for you, boy." You know that? And he had like this snarl. And so anyone who grew up in the South, in this little town that I grew up in, you just know that boy is a substitute word for something else, much worse. And so they threw me in a jail for that night. And just being in that jail, it was cold. in West LA, the dead of winter. There were people in the jail cell, and I just remember the toilet that was right there in the open, and it was just very inhumane. And what that experience did, it just, that was the beginning of my life falling apart. You know, I remember calling home, and my mom said to me, "Who do you think you are?" And I said, "Okay, to you later." I didn't talk to my mom for a year because I
Oh,
wanted her to understand. And it wasn't until she died that I realized what she was saying. Don't you know that we live in this world? That, you know, it wasn't that she was saying, "Who do you think you are?"
yes.
And so, being so broken at that time, it took me many, many years to like piece it back together. And part of it was traveling, seeing police officers in Paris. And so when I came back to the United States, I refused to have those feelings with police officers ever again. So I would see them in the store or wherever, and I'd say, "Hello, how are you today?" And just refusing to be that shriveled up person that I became. I do regret all those years because my relationship with my mom, who was my everything, it was never ever the same after that. I felt so hurt, and I think she probably felt so afraid for me
Yes.
because up until that point, nothing had signaled that I would spend a night in jail. You know, fortunately, it was just that one night in jail, but I think I would love for people to understand the emotional devastation that can cause for someone, and imagine if it were worse. People who are unfairly imprisoned or mistreated in a more physical or aggressive way by police officers. But there is that up until that point, after that, there was a constant thing that I carried. A friend of mine, she went to Africa for the first time, and she said she felt like a thing on the back of her neck was missing. So for black people in this country, they have a thing on their neck that we are constantly carrying a burden. And so constantly having conversations with ourselves that I don't have to carry this. I'm free. I can unshackle myself. So constant unshackling.
I love it. Oh, thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you. Aisha?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know, one thing that crossed my mind was I wish I didn't have to feel some of the things I feel sometimes. Like grief and and worry about about beautiful human beings who live in the system.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to change it. I want to continue to feel. I think it's what makes me human. Who would I be if I didn't feel that? I would be the kind of people who can commit those atrocities, who become numb, who just turn it off or go into denial or uh, just closed off their heart. I don't want to be that person. So I think it's just part of the price that one pays to be human. But it's also, I think, a beautiful thing. I think it's I think when I can be with someone, when you can be with someone who's had a loss, who is in pain, who is suffering, and be fully 100% with them, it's a healing. It's a healing moment. It's a grace-filled moment. So the trick is not letting it become. Is not forgetting the truth that's in the midst of that. It's not, it's not me not forgetting what is real and what is true, and that the greatest power I have, the greatest power that we have, is our spiritual power.
Yes. That's beautiful. Um, I will join in and say that this definitely has been, for me, this space of trying to anchor more spiritually to the spiritual work that I've done, but also realizing that this is a time of action and call, and that using my spiritual tools to push the bubble, to move things, but at the same time, I've noticed myself that there were a lot of things that I had suppressed, just to keep moving, to keep the train going, to keep Geno Inc. taking the next step. And so it's coming up. And being mindful to be gentle with myself, because there are times that the anger has come up, the feeling of frustration. Whenever I hear people say that we got a long way to go, it's like, good Lord. So this is a powerful time that we're nurturing. I do feel that it is extremely different, and that people are really waking up. And so if there's any word of encouragement that you would say to anybody and everybody in 3 words, what would that be? And whoever wants to go first.
I would say it's a question, and I think in the midst of chaos, to ask ourselves, where is the love in this? Where is the power in this? And to listen for those answers that come.
Thank you. Beautiful.
I'm going to throw out the 3 words.
Yeah, come on, give them to me.
I would say we were born for this. I was born for this. I'm here, so I'm supposed to be here, and I have a job to do. I'm here for a purpose, and that moment has arrived.
I love it. I love it. Darmini is going, woo! And I would say, just as your poem said, never, never, never has love created chaos and hate. Love is right here on the plate. And love is very different for all of us. And recognizing it doesn't have to be the same. The beauty of our differences is powerful. It is the reason the world continues to expand. And as you have said, we have gotten the call. I think all of us here now, we have said yes, so we must continue to do what is ours to do. And know that whether I understand what your call is or you understand what my call is, that call at some point will unite us and expand us to this greater yet to be. So in closing, I want to thank you both so much for being here. This is really an awesome evening. Outside of the enormous heat that's going on in here, my beloved Dormini keeps trying to give me some fan. So in closing, the one last question I would ask. In your America, what would that look like for you? I know we went deep, right?
Yeah. Wow. You first, Jelani.
Uh, yes, we'll save the best for last. And
Yeah.
thank you. I just want to say thank you. I really had fun and appreciating your artistry, your creativity, the blessing of voice, and your questions. And that's the second time I've heard Aisha's poem, and it always moves me. It's really powerful and beautiful. And I appreciate her as a longtime friend. I would say that in a more ideal America, that we because my studies this summer have been on racial capitalism, and there's a connection between race and capital. That we didn't live in a world where someone had $190 billion to himself, or that we didn't have trillions of dollars on a few billionaires, and that people could have decent living lives where no human being was unhoused, no human being did not have access to incredible health care. Because looking historically, when we've been closer economically, we've lived better. And so I think it has, I'm speaking something to do with the greed and the avarice that, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I know it's Bible. This just ain't right.
I love it.
I would say everything he said. And I read a beautiful book once called I forgot what it was called, but it was all about social justice and beautiful resistance movements around the world. In the last chapter of the book, the author said, "Now, for all of this to come to fruition, we who are engaged in activism must be willing to imagine ourselves having a life beyond that. Like, who would we be if we were not engaged in struggle, quote unquote, or trying to create all the change?" And so, not just for people who are focused on that, but for all of us, who would we be? How would we create if we were not struggling for survival, if people weren't trying to pay their bills, didn't know if they had a place to live, didn't have to make somebody less in order for them to be enough? What would we create? And there is the potential. It's real that we could be in a leadership role in imagining what really a new world could look like when we're not on fossil fuel anymore, when we're rebalancing the planet, when our energy can be used for creativity and not just amassing things, when we really find fulfillment and pleasure in art and creativity and beauty. I know how it sounds, but why not? Like, otherwise, why are we here? So that's what I mean. If I really go far, people talk about radical imagination. It's like letting go stark, raving, wild, radical imagination.
I love it. I love ditto, ditto, ditto to what both of you said, because we can't do it with the old littleness that there's not enough, that in order for me to be great, I must step on you. So it is a call for a radical new thinking and a radical heart of love. I thank you both so much for being present and for sharing your love, your wisdom, and insight, and spending this time with me.
I love you, Jelani. I love you,
Thank
Gina.
you.
I love you
Yeah.
both. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Take care.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
You're tight.
As we get ready for our conscious giving, I want to make sure that you join us next week on Awakening Wednesday. It is now time for our conscious giving. grateful and thankful for this divine time, for this absolute knowingness. Yeah, we're thankful for this time together. I'm drying off. That's how hot it is in here. And I'm thankful for this divine, lovely napkin to dry me off. The gratitude and appreciation for life and all that is. Once again, thanking Aisha and Jelani for being present and for giving their heart and their all. And with that thanksgiving, I'm thanking each of you for being a part of Universal Spirit Center, for sharing this evening and for sharing this divine moment. So share it with your friends, share it with your family, share this conversation and open up to new conversations. We are blessed, so blessed. Radical new thinking. I encourage you to step into that. Thank you, God, for everything. 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 Feel that in your heart. Thank you, God, for everything. 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 'Cause you know what? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, God, for everything. 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 In that divine thanksgiving, I thank all of you for all of your loving donations through PayPal, through our webpage, through mail. However, I give thanks and praise for it. We now have a donate button on Facebook directly, right on the Facebook page. You can hit the donate button. We also have a PayPal button on our YouTube. Woo, woo, woo. Right up top, you'll see a little P there for PayPal. The P's for PayPal. And also there's a link directly if you want to use another source that will take you directly to our Universal Spiritual page of Donate as well. So we are stepping up and stepping out. I encourage you to join us on YouTube, subscribe, share with your friends. You know, Sunday, we're live every Sunday and Wednesday. We will be back here for Awakening Wednesday next Wednesday. So I hope you join in. It is a must see. Also, we have classes that are happening. Sarah, is your class still going, or is it almost coming to an end? Is your class still going? Oh, Grandma Hands. I know it's not called that, but Grandmother. Grandma Hands, which I know has dug underneath and really allowed people to search some of the things that are going on down in there. And so in your spirit and your soul, things that you've been carrying, we have a nightly meditation for you to check in. Sometimes you just need to be with other like-minded spiritual beings. Also on Sunday, we have a Zoom where you check in before and a Zoom afterwards. On our webpage, you'll see our Zoom community button. We also have our racial equality project, which next Friday, the 28th, we will have the movie Strong Island, which will open up new awareness for how racism and inequality is happening in our world and how it has been happening. Vote, 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 vote. On our webpage, you can go and check out if you're registered at the address where you're living now to vote. Make sure it's all current, because if you haven't voted in the last couple of elections, your name has been dropped. This vote, this coming season is so important. And vote by mail, or you can vote online. It'll be a much smaller area for polls, so there won't be as many polls and the lines will be extremely long. So do what you need to do now. You have until October the 3rd to make sure that your vote counts, and that if you're going to receive it by mail or do it online, make sure you do the steps now. We have a lot of things on the Racial Equality Project that we're doing. Check it out to see how you can daily be aware of where your consciousness is, what you're thinking about, and how you're impacting this world. Because now we have the call. Laisha gave us the call, radical new thinking. So I'm going to join her in that. And how can I see this world in a radically new and different way? I want to thank you all for being here tonight and for sharing your time and space and love. I'm sending this love out to Darmini, to Sarah, to Linda, to our divine guest in the room tonight, and to all of you. I'm sending out the love, and to these wonderful fans that I'll be able to really blast once this is complete. We are sending the love to you through all that is. I send my love over the mountains. I send my love over the sea. I send my love into the heavens, and it returns to me. Come on. I send my love over the mountains. I send my love over the sea. I send my love into the heavens, and it returns to me. Send joy. I send my joy over the mountains. I send my joy over the sea. I send my joy into the heavens, and it returns to me. Peace. I send my peace over the mountains. I send my peace over the sea. I send my peace into my heaven, and it returns to me. Now your radical thinking. I send my radical thinking over the mountains. I send my radical thinking over the seas. I send my radical thinking into my heaven, and it returns to me. Peace and blessings. I love you. I'll see you next week here on Awakening Wednesday. Thank you, and thank you again.